I love to read, and because I love to read, I am always looking for good book recommendations. I like reading fiction, but also nonfiction, and specifically if I'm reading nonfiction, I want the book to be good and I want to get something out of it that is usable and that I can, go forth and use in my life. So here in this video, we're going to talk about 4 nonfiction books that I read last year that most affected my life, most made a difference in my life. And then I'm also going to throw in a couple of fiction books at the end because it's such a good way to de-stress and also to just kind of see how other people live. Like, yes, the stories are not true, but they're, putting you in the mindset of somebody else, and I think that is such a powerful thing. If we haven't met yet, hi, my name is Becca. I'm an elementary music teacher and side hustler extraordinaire, and I have lots of hobbies, including reading. So here on this channel, we talk about all things like productivity and how to fit all those things in your life while still actually hopefully enjoying your life. That's really been the main focus lately, and we have been doing a couple of book club episodes where I talk through some of the main points of books that I have really loved. I'd like to do more of those this year, so I'm excited about that. And if you have any book recommendations, leave them down below, fiction or nonfiction. I would love to hear some and get my 2025 to be read list ready to go. I've been keeping track of my books read in my book journal, and I just want to give a little shout out. If you don't have anything like this, have something like this. It's just so fun to keep track of not just how many books you've read, but also some of your favorites. I set this one up last year. There's a video I'll link down below. I have not made a video for mine this year, mostly because I haven't set it up for this year yet, although we're only 2 weeks in, so I feel like that's okay. So I have a color and tracker, but I also have each of the books that I have read, which is how I figured out the ones I wanted to talk about here. I looked at this and I said, which ones made the biggest deal to me? And then I also have some other fun things. And then for some of the books, not all of them, I've been adding little pages where I go through for nonfiction, the most important things that I learned, notes, quotes, that kind of stuff. And then for fiction, just kind of things that I enjoyed, again, quotes or any of that kind of stuff. And it's just been really fun and a good way to kind of connect with the books that I really liked. I don't put everything in here. Well, I don't put everything in the fancy pages, but it's just, I don't know, it's just been fun. So a thing to try if you haven't done that. And without further ado, let's get into the books. Today I have 2 books about money and 2 books about productivity, and then a couple of fiction books. I didn't do that on purpose, it just kind of happened. So the first book I read last year, 2024, and also actually the first book I am reading here in 2025 is this one, The Richest Man in Babylon. This book is not new. It was originally published in 1926, and the essay at the back, which is where I am, that's the last part I have to read, was originally written in, let me see, make sure I get this right, 1890. So not new, but the wisdom of this book is still so true. The stories of The Richest Man in Babylon, it goes through a bunch of different money lessons, but they all go through as a parable essentially. So a story that teaches you a lesson. And it's just so good. It's fun to read. It's easy to read, but each of the stories that go through here are really just hounding in something important that you need to know. You can see I have what is this? It's a wrapper. Oh, it's the wrapper from the bath salts because I dropped my bookmark in the bath the other day. So I have one more to read, and then this will be my first book read this year. But it just has so many really good principles, and I like the approach to money because it's specific as far as oh, you should save 10%, which everyone says, but it also is realistic in but you should spend some money and you should do different things like that. So out of here, some of my favorite quotes from last year, because I already have this little spread written out. I have, wealth grows wherever a man exerts energy. Desires should be simple and definite. They reflect their own purpose. Should there be too many, too confusing, or something, a man's something to accomplish. Sorry, I wrote this last year. The more wisdom we know, the more we can the more we can earn. That man would seek to learn more of his craft should be richly rewarding. So I liked those. And then I wrote down just a couple of the main principles. Yeah, really good. Especially if you maybe didn't have anyone to teach you about money, maybe didn't have anyone to talk to you about money, maybe if money stresses you out, I would highly recommend reading through that one because it just goes through really simply like, here's what you need to do, like to actually have like a life where you can build wealth and be happy and all of that good stuff. So highly, highly, highly recommend. I will link all these down below in the description, by the way. Next up is The Psychology of Money. As you can tell, I'm always like in a money mood at the beginning of the year. I think it's because I like look through all my finances and like try to figure out, you know, how much money I made and like all that kind of stuff. So this one I heard recommended so many times, and I don't know about y'all, but sometimes when I hear a book recommended a lot, I'm kind of like, okay. But it was really good. I really liked it. I dog-eared a lot of pages. I know some people are against that, but I like to dog-ear my pages. And it goes through, each chapter is like basically a lesson. So each one, it's like, no one's crazy, luck and risk, never enough. And it goes through all these different things that like is the psychology behind how people spend money, how people save money, and all those kind of things. And once you figure out like, oh, I do XYZ because I'm thinking XYZ, you can change things a lot easier that way. So I found this to be really helpful, just going through and really fascinating. Not every part of the psychology went along with me. There were some that I was like, I don't do that. One of my favorite things that was written in here was the quote, "We don't see savings, retirement accounts, or investment portfolios." The idea being that wealth is what you don't see and rich is what is visible. So yeah, few of the key takeaways would be find humility. It says find humility when things go right, so don't get like overconfident, and forgiveness when things go wrong. So if you mess something up, don't like beat yourself up about it. Less ego, more wealth. That goes with the quote I just read. Increase your time horizon. So instead of trying to like get rich in like a year, like work on, you know, building wealth over your lifetime. Be less flashy, save, give room for error in ways of like having extra line items in your budget for like miscellaneous, and also for having like a savings account where you have money stockpiled for, you know, just whatever comes your way, because you never know what's going to happen. And then I loved that the last one was respect the mess, because there's no right answer. So when it comes to money, there's a lot of, I don't know about y'all, but you can feel a lot of shame. You can feel a lot of like, oh, well, I should do this, I should do that, but I'm not doing, you know, XYZ. And so I personally found like that just at the end, he was like, there's no right way to do this. Like, you just need to make decisions, decide what to prioritize for you, and just make sure you're, you know, following smart things, but it's not like this is the right way to do things and you can't do anything else. Like, it just is what it is. So, you know, there you are. So 2 books about money if you want to help with that. I have read many, many books about money because I'm always looking to get better at managing it, investing it, all like making it also, all that kind of stuff. So I could do a whole video on it, just that, if that's something you're interested in. I also would love some more if you would like to suggest them down below in the comments. Next up, I have 2 books about productivity. So this first one is called Slow Productivity. I loved this book. I just read it a few months ago and I am already ready to read it again. It's by Cal Newport, who is a college professor, and he has multiple books. I read 2 of his last year. And one was Deep Work, which he's like really famous for. And then this was almost like the follow-up, which is called Slow Productivity. So this one goes through like the specific principles of how to make sure that you are being productive, but in a way that actually goes along with your lifestyle and doesn't make you burnout. I think that's even the tagline. Yeah, The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout. I loved that in this he went through a ton of specific examples of knowledge workers. So a lot of writers, a lot of painters, a lot of like different like scientists and things like that, and went through their schedules and talked about like how they approached their work, because that's a lot more similar to like what we're doing now, because, you know, a lot of us are doing things like, you know, on the computer and that kind of stuff. You're not doing manual labor. Some of you are. And that's a very different than like I think about this all the time. Our schedules are set up like a factory, but like most of us aren't doing factory work. We're doing head work, and you get so much more exhausted. This book was coming out of 2020, COVID, and really what happened during COVID, everything going online amplified how little like extra time everybody had, because everything turned into like these big meetings and everything was like super scheduled. I don't know about y'all, but I felt that I was so overwhelmed those first few months because we were in meetings all the time, and I, one, hate meetings. Two, that's when I really realized how much I hate noise. And I thought that sounds so stupid because I'm a music teacher. I was telling my husband this the other day. Noise stresses me out. Not music. If I have 30 kids and they are all practicing what they're supposed to practice, I'm cool. But if I'm trying to talk and there's one kid going, I'm done. I hate meetings because it's like people talking over each other and it's just so noisy. I hate it. But like all the margin in our days went away. And so he's kind of going through and being like, okay, let's step it back and let's figure out how to like actually do this. He's got a lot of books. So the 3 principles of slow productivity are do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality. And he talks a lot about deep work as well. So if you've read that, definitely read this. I would say this is a lot of an easier read than deep work, but I felt like deep work was almost like the precursor to this. So I don't know, read them however you want to. We'll link both of them down below, but those are like the principles. I'm not great at this, as you can tell, because I have like multiple YouTube channels and lots of things going on, and I have a full-time job, and like we got a lot of stuff going on. But one thing I am personally have taken away from this that I'm working on is the idea of the I can't remember what he calls it now, but the extra work that every project causes. So every time you have a project at work or at home, there's all this like extra stuff of you having to talk about it, you having to think about it, you having to, schedule things. So the more projects you have, it's not just like, oh, I have, 5 projects. It's I have 5 projects plus all the extra stuff I have to think about. So one thing I've been working on is, instead of having multiple projects going at one time, because I tend to be like, oh, well, I should do one thing for music teachers, and I should also work on one thing for, this group, I should work on it because I have all the different YouTube channels, all the different things going on. Instead, I'm trying to focus, and so being like, okay, I'm going to work on this group of resources, or I'm going to work on this workbook, or I'm going to work on whatever I'm working on, and kind of looking at it as a project. I'm also kind of grouping my time differently. So I'm looking at, okay, what projects do I want to work on, and then kind of how long that'll take. So like right now I'm working, instead of like yearly or quarterly, I'm going like January and February are my first like time period that I'm kind of working through, and I have things I want to have done by the end of February. And then after that, we'll see what projects I'm working on. I have like a list of ones I want to work on. But yeah, so have a bunch of projects I'm working on, but I'm trying to like sequence them in a way that makes sense. So that's one thing that I personally got out of that. I'm not great at it because I do have a lot going on. I don't have a lot of margin, which has really been stressing me out, which I've really noticed. It's January, so I just got back from winter break as a teacher, and it's like been amplified recently. And so I'm kind of trying to think about that and trying to structure things accordingly. I haven't gotten to a good spot yet, but I'm working on it. The last of the nonfiction books is this book that just came out last year, Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal. He is on YouTube. I watch his YouTube channel quite a bit. He is a doctor turned entrepreneur, and he talks a lot about productivity. That's kind of like, I feel like kind of where he got his start and where things like really started to take off. He also has a lot of like studying things from when he was in university. As you can see from the sticky notes, I've been experimenting with like note taking. So on this one, I was like sticky noting things that I thought were really useful, and I need to go through and like write them all down. But basically the whole premise of this book is that you will be more productive if you're actually enjoying your life and not miserable, which is not how people typically approach productivity. So I have really enjoyed that. And I also love that he comes at it as like, here's a whole bunch of experiments you can try them out and see what works for you. So he breaks it down into like 3 different categories. So the first one is energize, and in this one he talks about making your work feel like play and using like other people and doing, you know, like work with other people and using people, not using people, but incorporating other people so that your work seems more fun, and really like trying to make your work energizing instead of draining, and like what, you know, things you can do will feel like that. The second part is called unblock. So that focuses on seeking clarity, finding courage, and really like beating that procrastination. So if that's your struggle, that's where you'd be. And then the last one is sustain, where he goes through like conserving energy and things that recharge you. So instead of like work, making sure that you include things that energize you and recharge your battery so that you're not exhausted all the time, and making sure that you are working on things that align with you as a person. So highly recommend. It's a really easy read, and every chapter at the end, let me see if I can find one real quick. There's like little experiments all throughout where it's like, here, try this, see how it goes. Here, try this, see how it goes. And there's quite a few little experiments that you can try for each chapter to, you know, incorporate whatever it is that they're talking about. And I love that it's like super specific. Y'all know how I feel about making sure things are really specific and you have a key takeaway that you can get out of everything. So that one was really good. So those are my nonfiction recommendations. A couple of fiction books that I loved this year. I have 3 for you in absolutely no particular order. First one is The House on Biscayne Bay by Chanel Cleeton. If you have watched any of my videos, you know I love Chanel Cleeton. I'm looking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of her books. And I have already been looking because there's a new one coming out this year, and I am pretty excited about it. So this book was a little bit out of the ordinary though. Most of her books, they're all historical fiction. Well, all the ones, there's a couple like romance. I haven't read those. But the ones I've read are all like historical fiction. They focus mainly on Cuba and Spain and South Florida and a lot of like things throughout like the 30s and the 60s and things like that. This one is a little more of like a, almost not quite a thriller, but almost a thriller. So if you're into that, it would be closer to that. This one is in Miami, so we are in South Florida, and it focuses on a house. And so it's the person who lived in the house originally versus lady who is going to the house now. And so it's dual perspective, which I love, and it is a little bit creepy. Not super creepy though. I wouldn't read it if it was super creepy, but a little bit creepy. There's some mysterious things going on. Some people die, some peacocks die, and we got to figure out what the problem is and where, you know, what has been going on in this house. Basically, the original owners, somebody died like shortly after they moved in, and so like the newer timeline is looking at like trying to figure out what happened then, and then crazy things are happening now. There's a lot going on. So that one is really fun. The second book I read that I loved is Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. I love her. She actually writes horror. I was introduced to her with the book My Cousin Rachel in a horror class in college. I got to my English class and they were like, it's going to be a horror unit. And I was like, this sounds terrible. It was actually pretty interesting. Didn't gel with everything, but I loved her. So she's written Rebecca and My Cousin Rachel are the most famous. She actually has a lot of books that are not in that genre though. I've read some historical fiction, and I've read some like almost sci-fi fantasy kind of situations. So she's got a wide variety, which I love. This one was historical fiction, and it centers around a rich lady in the court. Does it say whose court on the back? No. The king's court, whoever the king was, and then a pirate, a French pirate, who may or may not hang out in the creek. So I feel like we're not giving anything away with that. It was really fun. It was really interesting. A lot of stuff went on, and it was especially interesting because I feel like a lot of times when you read books, they're written by authors who love reading and love writing, and so they kind of like gel with me, and we have like a similar viewpoint on life. And she did such a good job of getting in the head of someone totally different, and so that has been interesting. I'm like, why are you doing that? No, don't do that. But she can't hear me, so really fun, really interesting, lots of twists and turns. You don't know what's going to happen. Highly recommend. And then my favorite fiction book of the year was this one, Surviving Savannah by Patty Callahan. I am now really excited to read Becoming Miss Lewis, which is a pretty famous one that she also wrote. I picked this one up in Charleston, actually. I'm from Savannah. We were in Charleston. We went into Buxton Books, and we were looking around just at the books and stuff, and I saw this one, and I was, you know, interested because it said Savannah, and then I noticed it was a signed copy, and so I was like, well, you know, we will pay full price to get that signature. So it wasn't extra, but normally I, you know, buy as cheap. I usually buy used books on Amazon, but here we got our signed copy, so I paid full price for this one. It was so good. She did such a good job. She's not from here, but she, I think, yeah, so I think she lives in Alabama most of the time, but she also lives in Bluffton, which is actually like where my husband works, right across the border in South Carolina. And she does such a good job of really like getting the feel of Savannah in this book, and I love it. It's also dual perspective. It's actually three people, two people who were on the steamship Savannah, which was a massive shipwreck that happened in the 1800s, and then one person who's current, like living right now, and she's investigating the, not Savannah, Pulaski. It's the Pulaski. Yes, it's the Pulaski shipwreck. Sorry. That left from Savannah. So that's why it's the Savannah. So the Pulaski is the name of the shipwreck. I'm sorry. The steamship. And so it's, the new girl is doing a research project on the Pulaski, which is a real boat that really sank. And so she's trying to like piece together things now that happened in the 1800s. It is so good. It is so fascinating. It goes through, there's a lot of like, the characters really growing, especially the girl in the current timeline. She like really grows up throughout this. We got somebody who's like trying to escape something. We have a lot of people do die because there's this shipwreck, but like people kind of like moving on after that. And it really faces the question of like, if you have a tragedy in your life, how you can kind of choose which way to go, because somebody on this boat chose to be a really terrible person, and then other people chose to be really good people, and so it was just really interesting. And it's nice and long, which I love a good long book. It's like 400 pages, and if it's a good book, I want it to be as long as possible because I want to get as much out of it. It's so good. Highly recommend. Definitely read this one. Okay, I'm about to go read. Does she have more books? It's so good. It like, oh man, she has a lot of books. Oh, how exciting. All right, we're about to have a great time here in 2025 reading all her old books. Anyway, those are a couple of my recommendations for things that I loved last year that you can read this year. Leave your recommendations down below in the comments, and if you haven't yet, do hit the subscribe button because you made it all the way to the end of the video, so clearly you know, hopefully got something out of it, right? I hope so. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.